Hey there, it's Ezra, just a simple fisherman from Galilee. I've spent my entire life mending nets and casting lines, but one evening changed everything. Picture this, the sun setting over the sea, the sound of waves, and me, just another face in the crowd, drawn to a man whose words promised more than fish could ever offer. I was skeptical, maybe even a bit cynical, but something about Jesus' message tugged at my soul. What if I told you that one gathering could shake the very foundations of my existence, challenging my fears and igniting a flame of hope? Stick with me to uncover how a simple invitation to seek a different kind of kingdom turned my life upside down. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The sun hung low over the dusty hills of Galilee, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the parched earth. I, a simple fisherman named Ezra, was mending my nets by the shore of the Sea of Galilee, my hands stained with the day's catch. The rhythmic sound of the waves lapping against the pebbles was a constant companion, a melody to the otherwise silent evening. As I worked, my thoughts wandered to the stories I'd heard of a man named Jesus, who spoke with an authority that stirred the hearts of many. People whispered of his miracles, of water turned to wine, of the sick healed and the dead raised. Curiosity gnawed at me, not just about his powers, but about the source of his unwavering conviction, his motivation to challenge the established order. That evening, as the sky turned from blue to a deep purple, a crowd began to gather not far from where I sat. They were drawn, as if by an invisible thread, to a figure standing on a small rise, his silhouette against the fading light. It was him, Jesus, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd, speaking of a kingdom not of this world, of love, forgiveness, and a new way of living. I felt an inexplicable pull towards him, my hands pausing in their work. Around me, others too were captivated, their daily toils forgotten. There was a man, Simon, known for his temper and his nets, now listening with a furrowed brow, his usual scowl softened by intrigue. And there a woman named Mary, often seen at the market, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope, clutching her shawl as if it could shield her from the weight of Jesus' words. The air was thick with anticipation, with questions unspoken. What was this kingdom Jesus spoke of? Why did his words resonate so deeply within us, stirring a longing for something more, something beyond the daily grind of survival? As the crowd swelled, I found myself inching closer, drawn not just by the spectacle, but by a desire to understand the fire that seemed to burn within this man. And so, with the nets forgotten at my feet, I stepped into the crowd, my heart pounding with a mix of skepticism and an emerging, inexplicable hope. What could this man offer that would change the course of my life, of our lives? The scene was set, the stage was his, and the story, ours to witness. As I edged closer, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, a blend of skepticism and awe. I could see Jesus more clearly now, his eyes scanning the faces before him, as if he knew each soul personally. His words, though simple, carried a weight that seemed to challenge the very fabric of our existence. "Seek first the kingdom of God," he said, his voice steady and resonant, "and all these things shall be added unto you." The phrase echoed in my mind, stirring a mix of confusion and curiosity. What did it mean to seek this kingdom? And what were all these things he spoke of? My life had been about the tangible, fish, nets, the daily struggle to provide for my family. Yet here was a man promising something intangible, something that felt both elusive and profoundly real. Beside me, Simon shifted, his gaze fixed on Jesus, his face a mask of contemplation. I knew Simon well. He was not one to be easily swayed by words alone. Yet there was something in Jesus' voice that seemed to pierce through his usual gruff exterior. Mary, on the other hand, was visibly moved. Her eyes glistened with tears, not of sorrow, but of a profound recognition, as if Jesus' words had unlocked a part of her she thought long buried. She whispered to herself, or perhaps to the heavens, "Could this be the way?" The crowd was a tapestry of reactions. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered doubts to their neighbors. A young boy, no more than 12, tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking, "What does he mean by kingdom, Mama?" His question, so innocent yet profound, mirrored the collective query of our hearts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the last of its golden light, Jesus continued, "Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes?" His words struck a chord within me. Life was indeed more than the daily toil, but how could one not worry when the nets were empty, when the tax collectors demanded their due, when the future was as uncertain as the next catch? I glanced around, seeing the faces of those who shared my life's struggles. There was old Eli, his back bent from years of labor, his eyes squinting at Jesus, perhaps hoping for a miracle to ease his pain. And there was Leah, a widow, her hands clasped in prayer, seeking solace in Jesus' message. The evening breeze picked up, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the distant sound of a shepherd's flute. Jesus' voice rose above it all. "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" The metaphor was clear, yet it challenged our very way of life. Could we truly live without the constant worry, without the nets, without the daily battle for survival? The idea was both terrifying and liberating. As the crowd began to disperse, each person carrying the weight of Jesus' words, I lingered. There was a part of me that wanted to dismiss it all as the ramblings of a dreamer. But another part, a growing part, felt an urge to understand, to explore this kingdom Jesus spoke of. With the net still at my feet, I made a silent promise to myself. I would return, listen more, question more, and perhaps, just perhaps, find the motivation that seemed to drive this man, this Jesus, to speak of such profound changes in our lives. The next morning, the sun rose with a promise of warmth, yet my mind was still clouded with the words of Jesus. I returned to my nets, the familiar routine now tinged with a sense of unease and curiosity. As I cast my nets into the sea, the water seemed to whisper back the teachings from the night before. Simon, who had also been at the gathering, approached me with a grunt, his face etched with the lines of a man who had wrestled with his thoughts all night. "Ezra," he started, his voice gruff, "those words last night, they've been turning in my head like a storm." I nodded, understanding his turmoil. "They've unsettled me too, Simon. But what do we do with them? How do we live without the worry that's kept us alive?" Before he could respond, a commotion arose from the village. A group of Pharisees, their robes pristine against the dust, were making their way towards us. Their leader, a man named Caiaphas, known for his sharp tongue and sharper judgments, approached with a stern look. "Ezra, Simon," Caiaphas began, his voice dripping with condescension, "we've heard of this Jesus, this so-called teacher. His words are dangerous, they sow discord. You would do well to steer clear of him." Simon's temper flared, his fists clenching. And what if his words offer more than what we've been taught to accept? What if there's truth in what he says? Caiaphas's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. "Beware, Simon, the truth you seek might lead you astray from the path of righteousness." The tension was palpable, and I felt a chill despite the morning sun. Here was the first real challenge, not just to our daily lives, but to our beliefs, our community's order. The Pharisees' warning was clear, yet Jesus' words lingered, offering a different kind of challenge, one of faith and trust. As Caiaphas and his group left, their robes billowing in the morning breeze, Mary, who had been listening nearby, approached us. Her eyes were still red from the night before, but there was a new resolve in them. "Ezra, Simon," she said softly, "I've been thinking, what if we gather those who were there last night? Perhaps together we can make sense of Jesus' teachings. Maybe there's a way to live as he suggests, without fear." The idea sparked something in me. Here was an opportunity to not only explore these teachings, but to build a community around them. Simon, after a moment of silence, nodded. "Let's do it. But we must be careful. Caiaphas and his kind will not take kindly to this." Over the next few days, we organized a small gathering at my home. Word spread quietly, and soon the room was filled with familiar faces from the crowd that night. There was Eli, his back still bent, but his spirit eager, and Leah, her face hopeful yet lined with the hardships of widowhood. We discussed Jesus' parables, his metaphors, trying to grasp the essence of his message. It wasn't easy. Doubts were voiced, fears shared, but there was also a burgeoning sense of community, a shared quest for understanding. However, our meetings did not go unnoticed. One evening, as we were deep in discussion, a stone was thrown through my window, shattering the peace. A note was tied to it, a warning from the Pharisees: cease this folly or face the consequences. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Simon stood, his face set in determination. We've come this far. Are we to be cowed by threats? Jesus spoke of love, not fear. We continue. Mary, her voice trembling yet firm, added, if this path is true, then it's worth the risk. We must trust in what we've felt, in what we've heard. The group murmured in agreement, but the fear was palpable. The challenge was not just external, it was within us, testing our resolve, our faith in Jesus' words. Could we truly live without the nets, without the tangible securities we had always known? As the meeting dispersed, I stood by the broken window, looking out at the night. The stars seemed to echo the promise of Jesus' kingdom, yet the path to it was fraught with obstacles, both seen and unseen. The journey had begun, not just to understand Jesus' teachings, but to live them, amidst a world that might not understand or accept our quest. The following morning, the village was unusually quiet, as if holding its breath. The sun rose, casting a warm glow over the Sea of Galilee, but the usual bustle of fishermen preparing their boats was absent. Instead, a somber mood hung in the air, a reflection of the tension that had been building since our gatherings began. I walked down to the shore, my steps heavy with the weight of the previous night's events. The broken window at my home was a stark reminder of the opposition we faced. Simon was already there, his boat still on the shore, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Simon, I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. He turned, his expression grave. I know, Ezra. The stone through your window. It's a sign. They're not just warning us. They're threatening us. I nodded, the gravity of our situation settling in. We must decide how to proceed. Do we continue in secret, or do we confront this head on? Before Simon could answer, Mary approached us, her shawl wrapped tightly around her despite the morning warmth. I've been thinking, she said, her voice steady, about what Jesus said about not worrying. If we truly believe in his message, we must show it, not just in our words, but in our actions. Simon's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly wrestling with the implications. But how do we do that, Mary? How do we live without fear when fear is all around us? Mary's gaze was unwavering. By trusting in what we've heard, by living it out. Perhaps we should invite Jesus to speak again, publicly this time. Let the village see what we've been discussing. Let them hear for themselves. The idea was bold, almost reckless, but it resonated with the part of me that had been stirred by Jesus' words. If we do this, I said, we must be prepared for the consequences. The Pharisees will not stand idly by. Simon clenched his fists, a sign of his internal struggle. We've come too far to turn back now. Let's do it, but we need to be smart about it. We gather everyone, make it a festival, a celebration of life, not just a sermon. The plan was set. Over the next few days, we worked quietly, spreading the word under the guise of a community gathering. We invited not just those who had been at our secret meetings, but also the curious, the skeptics, and even those who had previously dismissed Jesus as a mere troublemaker. The day of the gathering arrived, and the village square was filled with people, the air buzzing with anticipation and a hint of apprehension. We had arranged for food, music, and dance, making it seem like any other festival, but the real purpose was clear to those in the know. As the sun reached its zenith, Jesus appeared, his presence immediately commanding attention. He climbed onto a makeshift platform, his eyes scanning the crowd, his expression one of serene determination. Friends, he began, his voice carrying over the crowd, we gather not just to celebrate, but to seek understanding, to find peace in our hearts and lives. The crowd quieted, drawn in by his presence. Even the skeptics leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. Many of you have heard of my teachings, of a kingdom not of this world. Today, I invite you to consider what it means to live without the chains of fear, to trust in the providence of our Father. His words were like a balm, soothing yet stirring. I watched as faces in the crowd soften, some with tears, others with a newfound resolve. The atmosphere was charged, a palpable shift occurring as Jesus spoke of a life free from the shackles of anxiety and fear. Suddenly, a group of Pharisees led by Caiaphas pushed through the crowd, their faces stern, their robes flowing like dark omens. The crowd parted, whispers of unease spreading like wildfire. Caiaphas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Jesus of Nazareth," he declared, his tone accusatory. "You speak of a kingdom that undermines our laws, our traditions. You sow discord among the people with your radical ideas. We demand you cease this at once." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of fear and anticipation. Jesus, unfazed, looked at Caiaphas with a calm that seemed to silence the very air. "Caiaphas," Jesus replied, his voice gentle yet firm, "the kingdom I speak of does not come with observation, nor does it threaten your laws or traditions. It is within you, a kingdom of the heart, where love reigns over fear." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Simon, standing beside me, clenched his jaw, his eyes fiery with a mix of defiance and faith. Mary clasped her hands together, her eyes closed, as if in silent prayer. Caiaphas, however, was not swayed. "Your words are deceptive, leading the people astray. We will not stand for this." Before Jesus could respond, a young boy, the same one who had asked about the kingdom, stepped forward, his small voice clear and brave. "But why can't we live like the birds, without worry? Why must we fear when Jesus says we are cared for?" The crowd murmured in agreement, the boy's innocence piercing through the tension. Caiaphas looked down at the child, his expression softening for a moment before hardening again. "This is not for a child to understand," Caiaphas retorted, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Jesus knelt beside the boy, his hand resting on his shoulder. "From the mouths of babes comes wisdom. Let this child's question be a lesson to us all. If we trust in the Father's care, why do we burden ourselves with fear?" The crowd began to shift, their allegiance visibly swaying. Even some of the Pharisees seemed to hesitate, their faces reflecting an internal conflict. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice rose, strong and clear. It was Leah, the widow, her voice trembling but resolute. "I've lived in fear and want, but today I choose to trust in what Jesus teaches. I choose to seek this kingdom he speaks of." Her declaration was like a spark to dry tinder. One by one, others echoed her sentiment, their voices growing in number and strength. The festival atmosphere transformed into something more profound, a collective awakening. Caiaphas, seeing the tide turning, raised his hand for silence. "This is blasphemy! You will all face the consequences of following this man." But his words were drowned out by the crowd's chants. "Seek the kingdom." In that moment, I felt a surge of courage. I stepped forward, joining Jesus on the platform. We will not be silenced by threats or fear. Jesus offers us a way to live, truly live, beyond the nets, beyond the daily struggle. We choose this path regardless of the cost. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a testament to their newfound conviction. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Ezra, Simon, Mary, and all who hear my words, you have chosen a path of faith, not fear. Remember, the kingdom of God is within you, and it is yours to seek, to find, and to live." As the crowd's fervor reached its peak, Jesus stepped down from the platform, his presence still commanding the space around him. He moved through the throng, touching hands, offering words of comfort and encouragement. The Pharisees, seeing their authority challenged, retreated, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. The festival continued, but now it was imbued with a deeper meaning. People shared food, stories, and laughter, but there was an undercurrent of transformation. Simon, who had always been a man of action, now stood with a different kind of strength, one born from conviction rather than might. Mary, her eyes still glistening, found me amidst the crowd. Ezra, she said, her voice filled with a newfound peace, we've started something here, something that might change everything. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Yes, Mary, but it's not just us. Look around. We're all part of this now. The day waned, the sun setting over Galilee, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed the story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.